if you're a founder in Canada, you have a playbook, which is number one, try to get outside the country as soon as possible.
I'm sure that most Canadians have experienced it this year. You're at the grocery store, you're checking labels, you're making sure your meat, your veggies, your ketchup chips all come from Canada. Because in 2025, buy Canadian is a thing. But in tech, the accepted truth is that Canadians are the worst customers. Entrepreneur Raymond Luk is trying to change that, launching a new summit called Source Canada to solve our procurement problems. And look, I've been on the record before that procurement is not the sexiest subject, but times have changed. Procurement touches R&D, productivity, national sovereignty. So, why don't Canadians buy Canadian tech? And what are we going to do about it? Let's dig in. This episode of the BetaKit podcast is brought to you by the Cyber Challenge, powered by Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst and CCTX, your startup's pathway to sales, industry connections, and non-dilutive funding. Now, Ontario's critical sectors depend on operational tech systems that weren't designed for today's cyber threats. Unlike IT, operational technology environments demand specialized solutions, and startups can lead the way. Join the Cyber Challenge's free webinar on October 24th to learn about the risks critical sectors face and how startups can seize this opportunity. Register today at thecyberchallenge.ca. Do you accept the challenge? Ray, thanks for doing this, man.
Love being here. Good to see you.
We are going to get into possibly the most exciting topic
You mean procurement?
Yes, procurement. But no, this is really important. I think most Canadians maybe don't understand how important it is, and we're going to connect some threads. Yeah. But I want to start off at the high level because we're coming into this for a reason. Tell everybody what Source Canada is and what prompted you to start an event dedicated to procurement.
Yeah. It's like the worst marketing tagline ever. Luckily, we don't advertise that. But yeah, I mean, I started Source Canada like 90 days ago. It's like a really young project, and it's an election year, and in election year, I think all Canadians, it was great to see, right, how energized we all were, and
elbows up.
Yeah, like my elbows have never been higher up, and we all became kind of armchair kind of pundits, and as we should,
economists,
like
and
like everyone's googling like what is macroeconomics, but I think that's that's democracy, right? You have to participate, you have to educate yourself. So it was fantastic. One thing I wasn't seeing, because I was seeing a lot of government policy, obviously, because it's an election, but I wasn't seeing a lot of discussion around something more tangible. Like I really felt like, yes, after I've wrote my LinkedIn post about what the government should do, I felt kind of dissatisfied because I thought, but what can I do?
Oh, you didn't get the engagement numbers you were looking for, is what you're telling me.
I don't even try to get the engagement, but please follow me on LinkedIn. But I felt like there's got to be something that I can do as a startup person, as a founder, as a business person. And I think that there's a lot that the business community can do. And I focused on, maybe procurement's the fancy word of saying just buy stuff that we produce. And I said, you know what, I think we need to do an event, like a summit where we can talk about it, but more than talk about it, we can actually do it. And that was the kind of genesis of Source Canada.
Okay. I want to get into then what Source Canada is and actually how it is. It's really cool and interesting, and how several posts about it, including BetaKit story covering the announcement, actually blew up. But talk a little bit about your journey to that idea of identifying procurement as a thing that you could contribute to. Because I know, like, for people who don't know, you are an entrepreneur. You're a data guy, I would say. You've also like run incubator, accelerator creation, like startup creation organizations. What in your background led you to be like, procurement's the actual issue? And maybe even just like, we're talking about procurement being like the buying of goods and services from companies fundamentally. Like what led you to being like, this is the thing that I'm going to circle in this post-election environment that I can contribute to, or I think is going overlooked or needs more attention?
Yeah, I mean, like I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And so like any Canadian founder, we we have a playbook, which is especially obviously if you're in B2B, but also B2C. I think I would argue it's both. Like if you're a founder in Canada, you have a playbook, which is number one, try to get outside the country as soon as possible. Try to sell outside the country. And I my first company, I was selling software to newspapers. Crazy kind of idea, but
Remember those?
Yeah, newspapers were the pieces of paper and things.
Smash that like and subscribe button, everybody.
Yes, yeah. Please subscribe to BetaKit. But it was, that was the playbook I had, which was you need to get outside of Canada. And if you can land a big American newspaper or a big American business, that will then allow you to sell in Canada. So it just built in kind of the founder DNA of Canada.
And that's not just because of the bigness, it's because trying to do that in Canada was not as possible, right? It isn't just like go international because you want to be a global company and scale. It's like, it's going to be easier to do it. You're going to get big in Hollywood before you get recognized in Canada type of thing.
It's easier, right? I think that it's, of course, like everyone should be big internationally, right? Everyone should aspire to be a scale up and all that stuff. In most countries, you sell in your backyard, right? That's just obvious. Like, why would you not do that? And I think that a lot of Canadians are not aware that if you're in another country, like obviously like the United States, but it's not just the United States. It's much easier to get like domestic businesses to buy your product. And so I've known that my whole life on being both an investor and a founder. That's just the playbook. And I think in an election year when more people are thinking about Canadian sovereignty, prosperity, I think generally people are scared and people are pessimistic. And I think that, so naturally we're thinking, what are solutions? And I didn't want people to forget that the solution is not just lower capital gains, even though please lower capital gains. It's not just government procurement. There's a lot that we can do that, our domestic startups have this weird playbook. Like I call it like a home court disadvantage. And so the obvious easy thing.
It's the pathway to drain.
And why do people leave Canada and start their business elsewhere, right? That Gideon Hayden and others in that report covered that.
Oh, the leaders, we'll get to that report. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I think that procurement is the reason I wanted to kind of bring that back to the conversation is I didn't want people to think it's just funding, it's just venture capital, it's just government. It's like, but what's the third thing? It's like somebody has to buy something. And if we don't have people like domestically buying Canadian products, it doesn't matter how much support they get outside of the country. They're always starting at a disadvantage, right? So that holds the company back. On the flip side, if you're an optimist, I think I'm still an optimist. If you have more domestic support, and like I guess support's a terrible word, get like domestic procurement, domestic buyers, then the flywheel starts. Because what do investors look for when they invest? Traction.
Yeah.
Right. So
and there's no better traction than revenue.
It's the only traction, right? So if you can get early revenue, you get more investors, you get higher valuation, you get more other customers outside of the country. We talked about international expansion. The flywheel starts, and then eventually that well-capitalized Canadian company, when we're growing outside of the country, we're buyers of other companies. We're not selling to American companies, right? Yeah. That's the dream. And I feel naively that it's really easy to get started, right? It starts like Canadian consumers are doing this when they go shopping. When you decide to buy a quart of blackberries from Texas or from Mexico, that's a decision, right?
Yeah, or like Ontario apples or... Yeah. Okay, this is connecting a lot of dots here for me. Definitely in terms of your elbows up moment, you're looking like, what is a pain point I experienced as a founder? How can I use that to solve a problem for like the national startup that is Canada? Yeah. You're choosing this moment and then going to launch a summit to really talk about it. As we said, the announcement kind of blew up for something that's been in existence or conceived of for 90 days, coming in pretty hot. I want to before we talked about like the considerations around procurement impacts, things like this. You were just talking about like Canadians going to the grocery store, buying Canadian blueberries, apples. They're checking the labels on everything.
Yeah.
And you have Canadians in certain, let's say, consumer goods sectors definitely leaning in, like at the checkout aisle.
Yeah.
I got to get back to this original idea coming from the tech entrepreneurial space, which is where we play. Why is it that Canada doesn't buy Canadian?
Yeah.
Why is it that the founder playbook is get out of Canada as fast as you can to find traction?
Yeah. Listen, like there's like, I think about this a lot. There's two possibilities, right? One possibility is that Canadian startups are bad, right?
Yes.
Like, listen, we have to be we have to be logical about it. It is a possibility that our startups are just not as good as other startups.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people believe that, right? I think that whether they say it out loud or not, I think that's one thing. Let's put that aside. So I'd say that's called like a seller problem. Our sellers are not good enough, our startups are not good enough.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't believe that. The other is that our buyers are hesitant, right? Our buyers are not good enough. They're not doing their job, and they're hesitating for some reason. So they in other countries, people make earlier bets on like we're not the only country in the world that creates startups.
Yeah.
Startups are all the same everywhere. They're young, they're risky, they're kind of crappy at the beginning, they're half baked, they all look weird until they become conventional. It's the same everywhere, but buyers here seem more allergic to that type of.
They want to wait till the conventional.
Yeah.
They want to wait until you go down to Hollywood and you're in the big movie, and then they'll celebrate you. They want to wait until you win the Grammy, and then they'll celebrate you. It's like we're
looking for validation, right?
Yeah.
It's and I think that the bigger issue that I think exists that it's hard for Canadians to kind of accept. But if you think about it, I think most people believe it in their heart. It's that we want external validation, right? We value ourselves. We love it when Americans especially love us, and we value that so much. And so going back to like, is it a seller or a buyer problem? I think when Canadian corporations and government, when they look at technology, there's this cultural belief that we're not good enough, and because when you kind of say good enough means you've made it in Silicon Valley, kind of like big in Japan, like back in the day.
Absolutely.
If that's your definition of good enough, then of course Canadian startups are not good enough, right? Because we have this insecurity that, but we can't even begin to understand what good enough means until you've made it in the Valley. If we remove that and we just say, let's just evaluate our startups based on the same criteria that bank in Silicon Valley evaluates that crappy startup from YC that just graduated. It's the same. Like so many people at YC are Canadians, by the way.
Yes, because they're going to a market where they have immediate access to capital and talent that'll, are comfortable with the process of going through validation rather than waiting for validation.
Yeah, that's very well put. Like, because what does going through validation look like? It's trying, failing, iterating. Like
it's not try before you buy. It's buy and try. And
somebody has to do something, right? That's actually it's why like procurement is. It's not I will buy. I'll be the last person to buy when everyone else has bought. That's not how it works in other places, and it's not how you benefit from new technology. If you're the last person, you're a laggard.
I want to get to the what we're going to do about it thing, because that's, I think, the prompt for Source and really important conversation to have. But there might be some people who are hearing this and being like, so what? Maybe actually Canadian entrepreneurs aren't that good. Maybe the products aren't as good. Maybe I can actually get a cheaper price at scale by buying the US or international thing. Is it really that big of a deal? In that macroeconomic, we all looked up what tariffs mean, elbows up moment, can we talk about some of the impacts that this has beyond just Canadian entrepreneurs going to the Valley? Like, how does this touch upon productivity, sovereignty? I know when we covered the launch announcement, you were talking a lot about R&D.
Yeah.
Is that correlated circumstance to this? Like, what does this feed into? Like, what is the outcome of the fact that Canada doesn't buy Canadian?
Yeah, there's so many examples, right? I mean, like, go back to COVID, right? Like, just taking it outside of tech. We didn't have a domestic supply chain of N95 masks.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, one of those times where people said, oh, I didn't know, like, international supply chains seem like a good idea. And they are, like, the world wouldn't exist without that. But now we can't get our masks, right? So I think a lot of Canadians at that point were like, oh, crap.
Or our shots.
That's another thing. But we also don't have a domestic vaccine production kind of supply chain. The other one's AI, right?
Yeah.
So we're
data centers,
sovereign compute, all that stuff. And so I think like that that conversation around sovereignty, which is, by the way, a really good conversation that I think it's good for citizens to ask ourselves and educate ourselves what that means. But I think like bottom line, there's a moment in time when, a large country is taking away stuff or threatening to take away stuff, whether that is a long-term trend or not, and we'll see. But I think that it's jolted people to say, oh, I can't rely on, foreign suppliers and foreign goodwill for everything, right? Defense, vaccines, technology, and playing nice. And it's actually I see that this is a kind of an excellent kick in the pants for Canada to say, but what can we do? What is our power? And then going to what you're saying is like, the impacts, like the facts that if we do it, maybe initially, like spinning up a N95 plant, it's expensive, right? We didn't have that capacity. Investing in some technology that is higher, like much more developed than another country.
It's hard to play catch up.
It's hard, but on the other hand, I don't think we should just roll over and cede the territory. Like, oh, there's somebody who is much larger than we are, so we just give up, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound Canadian to me. And I think, bringing it back to startups too. I mean, startups are not like it's the holy grail, right? It's not like building buildings and manufacturing lines and all that stuff. This innovation can happen really fast.
Yeah.
So playing catch up, when we're not talking, we're not just talking about buying NVIDIA chips and all that stuff. We're talking about new innovations. They can happen quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that's partly an insecurity that we feel good when Canadian innovators like AI researchers or entrepreneurs go to the Valley and succeed and they do it really quickly, but we don't realize that that can happen here too.
We're losing the gains from that when it happens. So there's there's the jobs consideration, there's the broad economic, in a tariff environment or just generally, if all that IP and that work is elsewhere, are we really getting the returns on those innovators, those people chasing the Holy Grail? And then you invoke the Trump clause here, which is there might be circumstances where we dramatically need sovereign access to certain things in moments of crisis too, COVID being the other example that you use, where we can't play catch up in a moment of crisis. So we've got to lay the foundation ahead of time. Is that where the R&D component comes in? Like if we are not spending money on developing the thing that should be bought and sold in Canada, we're also preventing buying and selling in Canada.
You either build it or you have to buy it from somebody else's supply chain. I think that like partly it's a confidence issue. Like, why do we think we can't do it? I think that's a cultural issue. And the second thing is that, Canada has a productivity issue, right? A productivity gap. If you look at all the OECD research, this has been happening for decades, right? Jim Balsilie's talked about this, and CCI and many other people that, our largest companies routinely fall behind when it comes to productivity. One of the reasons is because they're not investing in technology.
Continually investing.
Yeah, they continually don't invest, and that continually drops relative to other OECD peers. And on the other hand, and you and I both know this from doing this for decades, that we have a fantastic startup and innovation ecosystem that's capable of producing so much. So it's like people over here, builders, making awesome stuff. People over here, buyers, who really need to solve a productivity problem. I know it's not all solved just by startups, but
But we could
bring
we could
together.
upgrade our kits a little bit. We could
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
This is probably a good place to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about all the ways that Source Canada is going to solve these problems. This week's episode of the BetaKit podcast is presented by Xero, the cloud-based accounting software designed to help small businesses manage finances, streamline operations, and focus on growth. And we asked small business leaders to tell us about why they use Xero and how it transformed their financial operations. And today, we're joined by Emma Aaron, the CEO at Duco Media, an Ottawa-based marketing agency helping clients grow their brands.
My name is Emma Aaron, and I'm the founder and CEO of Duco Media. We're an Ottawa-based digital marketing agency that have been operating since 2016.
All right, so what were some of the pain points that led you to choosing Xero?
To be honest, when I first started, we were really using Excel files to manage everything and producing invoices ourselves in Word docs and then PDFing them. That's how small we started. But I remember when I opened our bank, like the business account, I remember we were applying for a funding application this was right during COVID, when a lot of the funding applications were required like financial statements and so forth. And it took us like hours and hours and hours to produce this. And I finally asked my accountant, I said, is there not an easier way to do this? And he said, well, actually, there is a software that I would recommend. Take a look at it. And that was Xero. So, the moment I saw the platform, I felt connected to it because I felt like whoever engineered the user interface probably had the same brain structure as I did, because it just made sense to me right away. And that's kind of how, those were the pain points I think that led us to Xero.
And do you have any favorite features on the Xero platform? Like, how has it improved your operations?
Because we're a marketing agency, we're using a lot of different software systems. And as you'll probably imagine, we're spending a lot more time in other systems. Our accounting software is really critical during specific times when we're doing invoicing, when we're applying for funding or producing our taxes, etc. And the key features for me as the CEO of the company is obviously managing cash flow. For me, that was something that was a problem before we started using Xero. And since we've started using Xero, I think that's really been more of a strategic advantage for our business because we can manage it better. The second critical feature for me is the reporting. And, financial reports, as I said, could take a lot of time, like 10, 15 hours. And with Xero, I can produce year over year financial reports within a few seconds. Xero has removed not only the burden of financial management, but I'd also say the fear of a year end, for example. How much taxes do I owe? Oh my God, did this get done? Was this paid for? It just removes anxiety as a small business owner, and at the year end makes everything just a lot more simple, not only for me, but also for my accountant, who obviously is always looking for a clean picture at the year end.
Let's talk about some of the measurable outcomes you've seen from using Xero.
Since we've started to use Xero, we've seen about a 40% increase in our ability to collect payments in terms of our timing. And the first year we implemented Xero, we saw about 120% growth in our revenue. And I would tie that really to two things. A, in terms of the time it relieved from me and the anxiety and fear it relieved from me in terms of cash flow, what's coming in, what's going out, but also our ability to acquire grants and funding was so much quicker because we had all the data that banks wanted and we could be as transparent with them as possible within a reputable system.
Would you say Xero has improved your life as a small business owner?
I'll be very honest, just like in our personal lives, I think in our business lives, finance is like the number one stressor. And on the business side, I think I manage it better on the business side, to be honest, than I do on the personal. But I'd say I think I need a Xero for my personal life as well. But on the business side, like I said, it removes that anxiety. Like you know where you are, and sometimes things don't look good, and that's okay. But at least you know, and you can take action to address that. And Xero is like that mirror where you could really see your business.
Across Canada, businesses like Duco Media are choosing Xero to manage their financial operations efficiently. Xero provides cloud-based accounting, automated workflows, and real-time financial insights, helping companies take control of their finances and focus on supercharging growth. Join thousands of businesses using Xero to manage invoicing, reporting, forecasting, and more. And learn more at Xero.com. When you're talking about this being a conversation for a while, like in my research, I just honestly just typed in procurement into BetaKit and then pulled every story that we've been writing about this for, at least the last 10 years that I've been involved with BetaKit. And it's been an ongoing, there's a lot of industry organizations produce reports showing impacts of procurement issues or make recommendations to the government. We've done this over and over again. You mentioned CCI. A lot of this actually refreshed around 2020.
Yeah.
We're seeing this across sectors like defense tech, health tech, clean tech. This isn't just how come you aren't buying the SaaS software or why didn't we keep investing in mobile phone technology so our BlackBerries got replaced by iPhones or whatever. Maybe because this has been something that's been going on for so long and discussed for so long to the point where, BetaKit's just historical coverage is like probably a really good snapshot year by year of this conversation. What are you hoping to accomplish with Source as a summit? And maybe walk us through like the components of that. Cause there's a lot of tech events that are like, let's celebrate winners for the builders, blah, 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 blah. Summit's an interesting term. What are you trying to make happen in the room, and what are the outcomes you're looking to see?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that in a way, like we either have too many tech events or we have too many tech events that are really over-indexed on inspiration and celebration. I don't mean this to throw shade on anyone running events because I love events, but
the inspiration and celebration events are quite fun sometimes.
Yeah,
I like going to them,
and we need to have that fun. But I think that what I wanted to do with Source was take just the juicy middle out of, because when you talk to founders, what they want out of going to an event is they want to meet either an investor or they want to meet a customer. That's really ideally what they want, right? So I wanted to get rid of everything else and just focus on, when I started Source, I said, I honestly did not, I don't like running events. Anyone who knows me knows that, I hate doing events. It's very stressful. I worry nobody's going to show up. It's like nobody's going to show up to my birthday party. But I said that I want to do something that can move the needle, and that means getting buyers and sellers together in the same room. And I want to create something that there's a risk that it will fail, right? Because if I wanted just an event with lots of people, I would have done it next year. I would have opened it up to way more people. It would have been a fantastic celebration. I would have had a great time.
Everyone claps, everyone applauds. You get the big keynote speaker to say the same things that we've been writing about for the last decade.
Yeah, and then we have 10 more years of BetaKit coverage on procurement.
Yeah, the numbers dropping and open letters being signed.
So again, not to take away from that the importance of policy, dialogue, thinking, celebration, right? I don't want to be the downer. But for me, there's two things I wanted to do. One was have this just be buyers and sellers, and I'm going to measure the success or failure of it because it could fail. I'm going to measure it based on how many new pathways are created between buyers and sellers, and ultimately, it's not all going to happen like next week, but ultimately, how many deals are done, revenue, dollars going from buyers to sellers. It's the only way to measure the success of Source Canada, right? So
this is where your hockey stick era data nerd thing comes in, is that you actually want to track the movement on this quantitatively.
Yeah, and not just, maybe a little bit difference is I don't want to track it just to publish research. I want to track it because if I fail to do it, shame on me, and I'm going to either beat myself or I'm going to iterate and I'm really just focused on that, right? Breaking down that barrier. And I naively believe that I can do it. That's the entrepreneur in me. but also that I see no reason why it can't happen. Like I know there's lots of reasons why large companies don't buy from small. And I'm not suggesting that just because you're a Canadian startup, you deserve to, nobody deserves to get revenue. You have to earn it. But I do think that there's a lot of kind of obstacles right now, cultural, structural, just people being in the wrong rooms or maybe being distracted. I think I can solve that problem. And then going back to what I was saying about risking failure, the reason I decided that I wanted to do it in 90 days was that, there's whenever people give advice to the government, you hear this, that in the first 100 days of the Carney government, you should do this. In the first 100 days of the Ford government, you should do that. And I don't know who invented the 100 days, but I said, if I'm going to do something myself, I'm going to challenge myself to do the same thing. In 100 days, I want to put on a conference, get 200 people to show up, get 40 of the largest companies in Canada and the top startups. And I want to do it like with a very, very small team and no government funding. If I can do that, anyone can do it. I think some people might think it's naive, like why do you think you can solve this problem? BetaKit's been talking about it for 10 years, and who the hell are you to think you can solve it? And I'm trying to change that. It's like, I'm not going to solve it, but if I can curate a room, kind of just watch what can happen. I think that something magical will happen. That's already happened, that people raising their hand and showing up in a very short amount of time. And if we can chip away at this narrative that what happened 10 years ago is probably going to be there in 10 years. And
this is an unsolvable Canadian problem.
That just seeps into the background. And it is, it's a hard problem to solve.
It's not, and it's not elbows up.
Like the slogan will go away, but hopefully the cultural change will persist. Like, even Buy Canadian. I mean, some people believe that it's just a slogan, and partly they're right. Like if we say Buy Canadian, but we don't follow through over the long term, then it is just a slogan.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing behind closed doors with corporations, and many of them at the board level are talking about, wait a minute, this is different than before. We don't quite know how to do it because we're giant billion-dollar organizations. We don't turn on a dime. But let's actually figure out what buying Canadian means in the long term.
Okay.
I know those conversations are happening, even if they're not publicly kind of shared. And that's going to be a theme next week.
So then I think it's probably a good time to talk about the people that you're trying to put in this room and maybe how they play into where the culture's at right now and the necessary culture change. And the way I see it is we've got entrepreneurs, let's say broadly, I don't even want to say startups, but entrepreneurs. Yeah. We've got corporates. And then I do think government is a component of this. And we're talking, I think before we're recording, you're saying like the procurement conversation was too focused on government for too long to solve this issue for us. But there is a necessary function of this. And I want to address maybe the two different ways. One, we've seen recent announcements by the Carney government to change the procurement processes. In some ways, they've announced I think a defense tech procurement component.
Yep. And a Buy Canadian policy.
Absolutely. We had Matt Lombardi of the Icebreaker on this podcast talking about just why there is no defense tech marketplace in Canada, because the regulatory requirements to participate in that have been really, really tough. And ultimately there's one buyer. We've covered similar stories in both health tech and clean tech. Yeah. Before we get to the matchmaking process, the people in the room, what are you seeing from those people in terms of the frameworks that they play in based upon their sector that are inhibiting them or preventing them from actually buying and selling? Because in the defense tech component, it was like very clear that we just haven't modernized this process to get companies certified to sell this stuff. Yeah. Which means they're not going to generate the revenue here. Yeah. Where are you seeing that? You talk about health tech, we talk about clean tech. From the people that you're pulling together, where are you seeing the places where they're like, we're actually legally or regulatorily inhibited to do this in a quick way?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, like for the First Source Canada, I made a decision that it's not going to be government focused, which means it's not going to be defense focused and really not health focused either, right? And that's just a choice, partly the scale and the speed of the event, and partly that I wanted not to be beholden to the government, because what I'm trying to do is also make people realize that, there's no reason that all large corporations in Canada can't also get together and publish a Buy Canadian policy on their own. They don't need to wait for the government. Like what I'm saying is that I think there's a huge opportunity for Canadian business to lead and government to learn. For me, that's ideal. When somebody says government will create the Canadian AI industry, I'm terrified. When I hear government say, we want to listen to business, we want to learn, and we want to kind of partly get out of the way and partly catalyze, that's ideal. So I think to answer your question, like we didn't really have we're not going to have a strong focus on defense and health, potentially future events.
Because those are two of the most government-associated regulatory required circumstances?
However, yes. But I think that what you talk about, most industries have some regulation. Unfortunately, in Canada, we're kind of over-regulated, banking just being one of them. But, even leaving aside banking, any large organization, there's kind of privacy, cybersecurity, all these things that most industries have reasons to say no to buying innovative startups. Because I remember going through this with one of my startups, selling to the government, and it was easy to get a pilot, but then the security privacy requirements were so high that you needed millions of funding, and you needed years. It would take 2 years to go through the security certifications. I think some of those regulations can change.
Is that just too much regulation, or is that just a circumstance where, like other things that we see in Canada, we haven't modernized the speed of delivery? So those like really useful checks and balances just take too damn long. Is it that the regulation requires them, or that it's like,
there's always
2 years later we'll finally get our passports, or we've seen this across Canadian society in the last couple of years, right?
I guess my point is there's always regulation. What there isn't is a desire. Like, speed is not a requirement of procurement, right? So when the requirement is we need to have every single regulation satisfied, which is, I don't have a problem with that. That's one requirement, but you can satisfy that by never buying.
Yes.
You can satisfy that by saying, great, in 10 years, you will be ready. And the whole point is that same company who's trying to chip away at, whether it's especially the government.
That's the Canadian no.
And
it's like, hey, we're interested. Just fill out this form for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And if you're still alive, get back to us.
Like, we need to be respectful to due process, diligence. I think that, sometimes from the founder mentality, it's like, just break things, go fast and break things. I think that's easier to say when you're a 10-person startup, and harder to say when you're, managing the health of all people in Ontario. So I think, I understand that as a citizen, and I don't want to go so fast that, I die, right?
Okay.
But I think that we do need to reintroduce the idea of speed back into procurement. I mean, defense is a great one because, we've made a commitment to spend a certain dollar figure by a certain time that implies a certain speed. And I think, even if we don't talk about defense, if that kind of opens the door to the idea that, wait, speed is something that we should be talking about. That's why I wanted to do source in 90 days, not 9 months, to say speed is one of the things that is holding Canada back.
You invoked CCI, Council of Canadian Innovators, and Jim Balsley, my old boss, previously. Of course, because we've covered this before, they had dropped some procurement recommendations last year, and one of them involved calling on the Canadian government to launch a national procurement-focused agency. And acknowledging that in this moment for you, you're spinning this up, you're like, there are easier problems to solve than maybe the government circumstance here.
Yeah.
Do you think we need a dedicated body within governments to look at this and instead of the regulatory requirements, look at that speed as one of their first requirements? simply just because, one of the biggest buyers in Canada is going to be the Canadian government, right? Do you see that as a viable or a necessary thing that we need to solve for, even if it's not your initial focus?
I think for government, yes. I mean, the major projects office, I think the government is working on that. So I think for government procurement, we have to remember there's so many provincial and then municipal, governments as well. It's not just one government. So I think the idea of a somewhat, I would never say unified, it'll never be unified, but drafting in the same direction kind of agency or interagency cooperation when it comes to that, I would love that. Where I don't think we need another agency is helping businesses to buy more Canadian. I think we can do that ourselves.
Okay.
I don't think we need I'm kind of scared by having another agency. I think that I think Canadian businesses are more than capable of getting together and coordinating, sharing what they can, saying, hey, if we're talking about this at the board level, what can we do to collaborate? And that's one of the things that I wanted to do with Source Canada was just get people in the room and start that conversation and show that we don't need to, like one of my fears about, building new organizations, including government ones, is just the time, right? It goes counter to what, that's not going to happen in a budget cycle.
Yeah.
So then we're waiting till next year, then it's staffed up, and now we're talking in 5 years we'll see the result.
Yeah.
Whereas
once we get open banking, everything will be fine, right?
I've heard that and crypto.
Yep.
Stable coins. But for me as a I'm impatient and I'm scared about the future of Canada. Therefore, I'm impatient, and I think we just need to take off that government is the answer to all of our problems. Government can cause problems, and I think people in government are aware that they're always trying to get the right balance. But I just think we can do a lot more, and we can do it faster. I do think that entrepreneurs should lead the way, because that's what they're used to doing.
I was at the CCI's 10th anniversary dinner, and they just so happened to have David Ossip, CEO of Dayforce, speaking. You should read about that. I wrote about it in the BetaKit newsletter as well. Yeah. One of the largest go private deals in history. It's just full stop. You can look up the numbers. And he was speaking about, one, he had this really novel idea that the government should incentivize through a tax break of allowing Canadian companies to buy Canadian software.
Yeah. But please don't wait for that. But yes, it's a nice idea.
It's also the most Canadians only look for tax breaks for solutions. But the one thing that he said that really stuck with me is that he had throughout his career, throughout his journey of having some of the biggest, most profitable exits ever as an entrepreneur in Canada. And it is obviously a very Canadian thing to suggest a tax credit as solution to all problems. But the other thing that David said, which was really interesting, and again, this is someone who has had some of the biggest exits and most successful entrepreneurs in Canada, is that a huge regret of his is that he was never able to convince other Canadian tech companies to buy from him. You say, I actually called it his biggest disappointment in his career is not getting support from other Canadian technology companies.
Yeah, I remember.
Later on, John Ruffalo, co-director of CCI, and then obviously Mavericks Private Equity said, Canada is essentially an untapped market because we don't do this.
Yeah.
How much of this responsibility is just on, forget the corporate level, other entrepreneurs and innovators just not buying from each other?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the answer is it's our responsibility. And I'm not saying that we should go around checking people's labels and make sure, we live in the world. We have to be realistic, but it is our responsibility, because I was there and I remember really taking note of his comment that he said, buy from each other. He said, this is the main difference when I'm in the United States. Yeah. If it's a room like this of 100 CEOs, we have already done business together.
We're all doing deals. Yeah.
In Canada, I think that does happen. I see entrepreneurs working with each other, but it's the same cultural kind of insecurity that we should be just as proud to do business with other Canadians as we are to do business with the hottest startup in the Valley. There's no, because we are the hottest startup in the Valley.
Yes, we should be more proud that we're doing deals here than that there are Canadians in the Valley getting deals done.
Yeah. That's a cultural thing. Like the example I always use, is like, I love Montreal bagels, as everyone knows. Everyone who knows me, and I'm a St. Viateur bagel person, so I've offended half of Montreal because it's much better than Fairmount. But the people understand that, like, when you're in Montreal, you don't say that Montreal bagels are better because New Yorkers like it. You fundamentally understand, like, you assume that Montreal bagels.
You rep your neighborhood.
Yes. I'm not losing anything.
Yeah.
I'm not eating an inferior bagel just because it's local. It is the world's best bagel, as most people agree.
In the exact same way that Sault Ste. Marie pizza is the best pizza in Canada.
I've not experienced it. Yeah, but
one day we will, and we'll do a whole.
But you know what I'm going to do differently is I'm going to assume that you're right. It's like, that makes sense to me. So we do need, joking aside, we do need a little bit of that. Let's just remove the insecurity, assume that we're great. Sometimes the pizza's not going to be great. Sometimes the startup is not going to be great. Guess what?
Give it a try.
Yeah, every country in the world has that same problem. It's not only Canada that our startups have to be perfect, but you go somewhere else and that's not the case.
Talked about what you want your outcomes to be, and as data nerd, how you're going to try to track that. Speed dating, quantify, deals done, dollars exchanged.
Yeah, and we'll do a follow-up podcast.
We'll do a follow-up podcast. We'll share the data on BetaKit for sure. Let's get back to that idea. You had referenced this Leaders Fund report. Like, what happens if we don't start trying to solve this?
Yeah.
Josh Scott, BetaKit reporter, covered this in relation to the H-1B visa. United States is like, again, U.S. has made an immigration policy change. Canada could take all this international talent and bring them here.
Yeah.
Exact same time, Leaders Fund does a survey of 3,000 Canadian-founded venture-backed startups over the past decade, found that only 32.4% of the Canadian high-potential startups created in 2024 were still headquartered in Canada a year later. And almost half of them were now located in the U.S.
It was a scary report. I think it's something we all know. We can't expect Canadian, and this is where, for me, it's not about capital gains and it's not about tax credits.
This isn't just about money,
no,
right?
But I think that when that many people are leaving the country, we do need to take note, and we have to ask ourselves, why is that happening? And for me, it does come back to, if Canadian companies get more customers, they will also get more capital, and they will grow and be successful. They'll probably still have different offices all around the world and maybe do lots and lots of business south of the border. But
headquartered here, because this is where the customers and the bagels and the pizza,
everything, it's. I think that report it wasn't really a surprise for most of us, but it's a wake up call.
Yeah,
because it was the first time that people had seen some of the actual data.
The numbers are bad.
And I do think, by the way, that choosing to remain in Canada, choosing to build a company here, choosing to have Canadian investors, it's not a compromise.
Shouldn't be a sacrifice.
It's like, I appreciate it, but it's not something that is poor you for staying in Canada, right? I think that there are some great entrepreneurs who are choosing Canada and succeeding. That doesn't mean that it should be like the hardest thing in the world and the worst place, and they should get a badge of honor for staying in Canada. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I also don't believe that the majority of Canadian entrepreneurs give us the absolute best tax regime, or otherwise we're moving to Abu Dhabi. There's always going to be people like that. That's not me. I love Canada. Yeah. I'm a Canadian. I'm proud to build my company here. I want the conditions to be better. They don't need to be perfect, because there's no place on earth that's perfect.
Yeah. There's a lot of Canadians who want to do it here that just need to be a little bit easier. And I think it probably starts with that culture change that we've been talking about this episode. Yeah. And I look forward to you completely solving that issue in a week, and then coming back and sharing some of the numbers, right?
No pressure, but the bad news for when this is going to come out is that we're sold out, so there's no more tickets available. But you know, for me, unfortunately, the problem will not
You're
be solved.
your own
in-
procurement issue. You're leaving money on the table.